The State of Israel was born on the 14th of May 1948, approved by both the United States and the Soviet Union, but hated by neighbouring Arab states who at once attacked the cuckoo in the Arab nest. Contemporary British newsreels described the situation as they saw it.
Abdullah of Transjordan, Farouk of Egypt and Ibn Saud of Arabia unite the Arab world against the Jewish state. Abdullah alone commands an efficient fighting force, the Arab Legion, trained and equipped by Britain under the terms of her treaty with Transjordan. Unless United Nations declare Abdullah the aggressor, Britain remains bound by the treaty.
Israel won. Her soldiers had gained experience as Jewish underground fighters during the previous British rule of Palestine, but it was a close-run contest. As a result, the new Israeli state ended up bigger than a United Nations resolution of 1947 had intended. This had recommended partition of Palestine into two states, one Arab, one Jewish. Most important for Israel, she took one half of Jerusalem, which the UN had scheduled as international. Transjordan seized the other, the eastern half, plus what's now called the West Bank. The British had ruled Palestine under a League of Nations mandate from 1922 to the birth of Israel. It was a turbulent period, with Britain paying the price of conflicting promises made to Arabs and Jews. Jews had been promised a national home in Palestine, so a regular flow of immigrants began, which Palestinian Arabs living there resented. Hitler's Holocaust in Europe added to the post-war immigration pressures. The war produced the first Palestinian Arab refugees fleeing to camps in neighbouring Arab states, never to return. Jews, by contrast, were flocking in. Israel's proud boast then was of making the desert bloom. Under the law of return, any Jew could become an instant citizen. Immigrants came particularly from Arab states where Jewish life had become difficult because of antipathy to Israel. They were needed to build the new state, which forged ahead fast in the 1950s. King Farouk, who came to the throne in 1937, was overthrown in 1952. Colonel Nasser, who later became president, emerged as a popular leader, modernizing Egypt, seizing big land holdings, starting grandiose developments such as the Aswan Nile Dam. When the Americans and the British refused to help finance it, he nationalized the Suez Canal in July 1956. Britain was outraged.
Sanctity of contract is one of the foundations on which all international peace and security depend. And if governments are not prepared to observe those contracts, if they can with impunity tear them up, then we are, in our judgment, striking at the foundations of peace and security. That was true in the 1930s, and it's still true today.
Angered by Nasser's seizure of the waterway in which they had shares, Britain and France plotted with Israel to teach Nasser a lesson. Israel's army struck across the Sinai Desert in what became the Second Arab-Israeli War and pushed on to the Suez Canal. Following the Anglo-French attack in October, British newsreels set the tone.
It's up to everyone here in Britain to do everything in our power to back up all our forces who are so coolly and efficiently carrying out their duties. Down below, we can see a bridge that's been blown up.
There was a furious debate in Britain about the British role, and in the United States, President Eisenhower was angry.
The United States was not consulted in any way about any phase of these actions, nor were we informed of them in advance. We believe these actions to have been taken in error, for we do not accept the use of force as a wise or proper instrument for the settlement of international disputes.
Under American pressure, the British and French troops withdrew from Egypt and were replaced by United Nations soldiers. Israeli troops too finally retreated to their borders. Israel gained two achievements. The Straits of Tiran, which Nasser had closed, was reopened to her shipping, and the UN force was to supervise Egypt's border with Israel. Nasser was now a national hero. Israel had won the war, but Egypt had gained the peace. The Soviet Union, now friendlier than ever, agreed to pay for the Aswan Dam, to supply Egypt with more arms and thousands of military advisors to train Egyptian forces. Beaten again, but each time the Arab side came back, strength renewed. Nasser built up his armed forces in the mid-60s and fell victim to his own propaganda about Egypt's might. And all this time, the common enmity they still felt for Israel was the Arabs' one unifying factor. In May 1967, the UN was ordered out of Egypt at short notice by President Nasser. He reinforced his troops in Sinai, concluded quick defense treaties with Jordan and Syria, then blockaded the Straits of Tiran to Israeli shipping. A fatal move. Israel had already warned him that this action would lead to war. On the 5th of June, Israel struck. Hundreds of Egyptian warplanes were destroyed on the ground. Jordan was given the chance to stay neutral, but King Hussein felt he had to support Nasser. His aircraft too were destroyed, along with Iraq's and Syria's. In 6 days, the Israeli army, safe from enemy air attack, took Sinai, the West Bank, Gaza, and the Golan Heights, enlarging its territory fourfold. But there was a price. Above all, Israel reunited Jerusalem, seizing the eastern half from Jordan and annexing it almost at once. This was followed by another great exodus of Palestinian Arabs, many moving on from refugee camps in the Jordan Valley where they'd lived since 1948. Most would never return. The UN Security Council met, but the war was so quickly over that the UN could do little but pass Resolution 242 in November 1967, calling on Israel to withdraw from occupied territories. Israel, Egypt and Jordan all accepted the resolution in principle, and 242 became the basis for any future peace negotiations between Israel and the Arab states. The Arabs, though, were bitter. Meeting at Khartoum on the 1st of September, they'd come up with 3 resounding no's. No negotiation with Israel, no recognition of Israel, no peace with Israel. Palestinian Arabs outside Israel now reorganized themselves into the Palestine Liberation Organization, or PLO, to fight their cause. Yasser Arafat, the PLO chairman, came to symbolize their struggle. The PLO grabbed world attention with a series of terrorist incidents, such as the hijacking of the airliners, which they blew up at Dawson's Field in Jordan. And at Lod Airport in Tel Aviv in May 1972, when nearly 100 people were killed or wounded. And the murder of Israeli athletes at the 1972 Munich Olympics. Brutal stuff, but the world took notice. Arafat's 1974 speech at the UN was the PLO's high spot.